The room went quiet the moment his words surfaced. No build-up. No dramatic announcement. Just a statement, measured, calm, unmistakably deliberate. Timothée Chalamet has finally broken his silence, and before you scroll away, do this now: like, comment, and follow. Because what he said isn't just another celebrity quote, it marks a turning point that's already reshaping the conversation around his career, his image, and his place in Hollywood. For months, speculation surrounded Timothée Chalamet. Headlines circled him. Social media filled the gaps he refused to address. Fans analyzed every appearance, every pause, every interview where certain questions went unanswered. His silence became part of the story. And in Hollywood, silence is never empty, it's loaded with meaning. When the statement finally came, it didn't arrive wrapped in controversy. It arrived with control. Industry observers immediately noticed the tone, grounded, intentional, and unusually direct for someone who has long avoided public commentary on personal narratives. This wasn't damage control. It wasn't a reaction. It was positioning. Timothée Chalamet is at a critical stage in his career. With major films, award recognition, and global visibility converging at once, every word he speaks now carries amplified weight. That's why this moment matters. Because breaking silence at the wrong time can weaken a narrative, but breaking it at the right moment can redefine it entirely. According to sources close to the entertainment industry, this decision wasn't spontaneous. It followed weeks of internal discussion, careful timing, and an understanding of the broader media climate. Hollywood is shifting. Audiences are demanding authenticity, but they're also rejecting oversharing. Timothy's response landed precisely in that narrow space between openness and restraint. What made the statement resonate wasn't what it revealed, but what it clarified. For the first time, there was alignment between public perception and personal intention. Rumors that once felt directionless suddenly lost momentum. Speculation that relied on absence found less room to grow. The narrative tightened. Midway through the reaction cycle, something unexpected happened. Instead of escalating into louder headlines, the conversation slowed. Analysts noticed a shift in tone across coverage. Articles became more reflective. Commentary became more contextual. This wasn't a viral spike, it was a recalibration. Zoom in on the details, and the significance becomes clearer. Timothée didn't frame himself as defensive. He didn't reject curiosity or criticize attention. Instead, he acknowledged the moment without surrendering control of it. In doing so, he changed the dynamic. The focus moved from guessing his intentions to understanding his trajectory. This is where the tension peaks. Because when an actor known for privacy chooses clarity over silence, it signals evolution. Not just personally, but professionally. It suggests readiness for larger roles, deeper influence, and a more defined public presence. Hollywood pays attention to signals like this. The payoff lies in what followed. Casting conversations reportedly shifted. Media narratives softened. Even fan discourse recalibrated almost instantly. The silence had created suspense. The statement resolved it, not explosively, but decisively. And that decisiveness carries long-term implications. Timothée Chalamet didn't just speak. He reset the frame through which he's viewed. In an industry where overexposure often erodes credibility, this move did the opposite. It reinforced it. As the dust settles, one thing is clear: this wasn't about ending speculation. It was about moving forward on his own terms. And that's why this moment matters more than it seems. If you want to stay ahead of how this shift unfolds, how it affects Timothy's next projects, public image, and Hollywood standing, stay engaged. Like the video, share your perspective in the comments, and follow for more breaking entertainment news. Because Timothée Chalamet has spoken. And nothing around him looks the same anymore. And as the industry continues to absorb what was said, a deeper layer of meaning is starting to surface. This wasn't a one-off clarification meant to quiet rumors for a week or two. It functioned more like a line in the sand. A subtle but firm declaration that Timothée Chalamet is entering a new phase, one where silence is no longer his default defense, but a strategic choice he controls. Hollywood insiders are already framing this moment as a pivot. For years, Timothee has been protected by ambiguity. His refusal to comment created an aura of mystery that worked in his favor while his career was still ascending. But now, with his status firmly established, ambiguity carries a different risk. Left unchecked, it allows other voices to define the story for him. Breaking his silence at this precise moment wasn't reactive, it was preventative. What's striking is how carefully the message landed across different platforms. The wording was neutral, but the impact was anything but. Fans interpreted it as maturity. Critics saw it as confidence. Media executives recognized it as narrative control. Rarely does a single statement manage to satisfy all three without triggering backlash. And yet, the most telling response wasn't immediate praise or outrage. It was calm. The kind of calm that follows clarity. When speculation loses oxygen, it doesn't explode, it fades. That's exactly what happened. Conversations that once spiraled into theory suddenly narrowed into analysis. The noise didn't get louder. It got sharper. Behind the scenes, this shift matters. Casting directors value reliability. Studios value predictability. Brands value stability. By speaking when he did, and how he did, Timothee signaled all three without saying so outright. He didn't reposition himself as a celebrity seeking approval. He positioned himself as an artist defining boundaries. This is where the story gains real weight. Because Hollywood is not just built on talent, it's built on trust. Trust that an actor can carry a project. Trust that they won't derail a campaign. Trust that their public narrative won't overshadow the work itself. Moments like this build that trust quietly, but permanently. As reactions continue to unfold, another pattern is becoming visible. Interviews conducted after the statement feel different. Questions are framed differently. The tone has shifted from probing to contextual. Instead of asking Timothee to explain himself, interviewers are asking him to expand on his craft, his choices, his future. That alone speaks volumes. This is the ripple effect most audiences never see. One controlled moment can unlock an entirely new level of conversation. And once that door opens, it rarely closes again. The tension now comes from anticipation, not uncertainty. Viewers aren't waiting for clarification anymore, they're waiting for what comes next. Which role? Which project? Which appearance will reflect this evolved stance? The silence that follows his words feels intentional, not evasive. In narrative terms, this is the true climax. Not the statement itself, but the shift it triggered. The realization that Timothée Chalamet is no longer being shaped by the conversation around him, he's shaping it. That realization changes everything. Because once an artist reaches that level of control, the stakes rise. Expectations rise. And every move carries more meaning. Hollywood understands this instinctively. That's why this moment is being discussed not as news, but as a milestone. And as the story continues to develop, one conclusion is becoming harder to deny. This wasn't about correcting perception. It was about setting direction. A quiet declaration of where he stands, and where he's headed. So if you're watching this unfold, stay locked in. Because moments like this don't repeat often. They mark transitions. And transitions, in Hollywood, define legacies. If you have thoughts on what this means for Timothée Chalamet's future, drop them in the comments. Like the video to support deeper coverage like this, and follow for the next chapter, because the silence may be broken, but the story is only just beginning. And now, with the initial shock settling into perspective, the larger implications are coming into focus. This moment is being discussed less as a reaction to pressure and more as a calculated evolution. Timothée Chalamet didn't speak because he had to. He spoke because the timing finally favored clarity over mystery. That distinction matters, and Hollywood knows it. For a long time, Timothee's silence functioned as insulation. It protected the work from distraction and allowed audiences to project whatever they wanted onto him. That worked when his career was still defined by ascent. But ascent eventually plateaus into position. And once you reach position, silence can start to blur intent. Breaking it resets the balance. What followed his statement confirms that interpretation. Industry conversations shifted almost immediately. Not publicly, but internally. His name is now being discussed with a different set of expectations. Not just talented or bankable, but anchored. Anchored actors are rare. They're trusted to carry not just performances, but narratives that extend beyond a single film cycle. This is especially significant given the current climate in Hollywood. Studios are cautious. Audiences are fragmented. Attention is volatile. In this environment, reliability becomes a premium trait. Timothee's choice to speak, briefly, calmly, without dramatics, sent a signal of reliability that no press tour ever could. There's also a generational layer to this story. Timothee belongs to a cohort of actors who came of age under constant scrutiny. Every move archived. Every pause dissected. For years, the safest response was no response at all. But the culture is shifting. Silence is no longer neutral, it's interpreted. By breaking it selectively, Timothee demonstrated an understanding of this shift rather than resistance to it. Midway through this ongoing conversation, a subtle reframing occurred. Commentators began comparing this moment to earlier career pivots by actors who successfully transitioned from rising stars to long-term fixtures. The common thread in those comparisons isn't controversy, it's timing. Speaking at the precise moment when silence would begin to cost more than it protects. This reframing adds depth to what might otherwise seem like a minor event. Because in Hollywood, longevity is rarely accidental. It's built through a series of small, disciplined decisions that accumulate over time. This was one of those decisions. What's also notable is what didn't happen. There was no backlash cycle. No counter-narrative gained traction. No follow-up clarification was needed. The statement held. That durability is telling. It suggests the message aligned not just with his intentions, but with public readiness to receive it. As days pass, the conversation continues, but it doesn't escalate. It stabilizes. And stability is the clearest sign that a narrative has found its footing. At this stage, people aren't questioning his choice anymore. They're factoring it into their understanding of who he is becoming. This is where the real payoff emerges. Not in headlines, but in trajectory. Timothée Chalamet has subtly shifted from being observed to being assessed on his own terms. The lens has changed. The questions have changed. And once that happens, there's no returning to the previous frame. Looking ahead, this moment will likely be referenced not for what was said, but for when it was said. As the point where ambiguity gave way to intention. Where silence stopped being a shield and became a tool, used deliberately rather than defensively. And that's why this changes everything. Because in Hollywood, careers aren't defined by single performances or viral moments. They're defined by control. Control over timing. Control over narrative. Control over growth. With this move, Timothée Chalamet demonstrated all three. So as the industry watches his next steps, his next role, his next appearance, his next decision, they'll be doing so with a recalibrated understanding. Not of a star reacting to attention, but of an artist directing it. Stay tuned. Because when someone reaches this stage, every chapter that follows carries more weight than the last. And as this recalibration continues, something else becomes increasingly evident: this moment will age well. Not because of shock value, but because of structure. Hollywood history is filled with loud declarations that burned bright and faded fast. This wasn't one of them. This was quiet architecture, meant to hold weight over time. The industry's reaction has confirmed that reading. Executives aren't talking about the quote itself anymore. They're talking about what it unlocks. About how it simplifies future campaigns. About how it reduces risk. About how it clarifies positioning without narrowing possibility. In a business where uncertainty can cost millions, clarity, controlled clarity, is invaluable. Timothée Chalamet's career has always been defined by precision. Role choices that favored longevity over immediacy. Collaborations that signaled seriousness rather than trend-chasing. This moment fits that pattern perfectly. It doesn't disrupt the arc, it sharpens it. It removes friction from the narrative and allows momentum to carry forward without resistance. What's particularly striking is how fans have responded over time, not just in the first wave. Initial reactions often skew emotional. But as days pass, emotion gives way to interpretation. And interpretation, in this case, has been overwhelmingly consistent. The consensus isn't that Timothee revealed something shocking. It's that he revealed intention. That distinction is critical. Intention is what separates reaction from direction. Reaction is temporary. Direction compounds. As more commentary settles, the silence that followed his words feels different from the silence that preceded them. Before, silence invited projection. Now, silence reinforces authority. It signals that what needed to be said has already been said. Nothing more is required. That shift alone redefines the power dynamic between subject and audience. Zoom out further, and the timing becomes even more significant. Hollywood is entering a period where image management is under intense scrutiny. Audiences are increasingly skeptical of overexposure and narrative manipulation. Against that backdrop, restraint reads as honesty, even when it's strategic. Timothee's approach aligns with that cultural moment almost perfectly. This is why analysts are calling it a career hinge. Not a pivot away from what he was, but a hinge that allows movement into what he's becoming. Hinges aren't flashy. They're functional. But without them, nothing opens. And now, doors are opening. Conversations around his future roles are shifting from potential to placement. Not could he, but where does he fit best? That's a subtle but powerful change. It reflects confidence not just in talent, but in stability. Stability is what allows studios to think long-term. Franchises, multi-film arcs, legacy projects. At the same time, this moment has insulated his personal narrative from future speculation. Not eliminated it, but contained it. Boundaries have been drawn. Expectations reset. The audience understands, intuitively, where the line is. That mutual understanding reduces friction going forward. This is the kind of move that doesn't dominate headlines forever, but it echoes. Years from now, it will be referenced as the moment his public persona fully caught up with his professional stature. The moment when curiosity gave way to respect. And respect is the most durable form of attention. As the story continues to evolve, one thing remains certain: this wasn't about closing a chapter. It was about stabilizing the foundation for everything that comes next. A foundation built on timing, restraint, and deliberate presence. So when people say, "this changes everything," they're not exaggerating. They're recognizing a shift that doesn't announce itself loudly, but proves itself consistently. Timothée Chalamet has stepped into a new phase. Not by reinventing who he is, but by clarifying it. And in Hollywood, clarity at the right moment isn't just powerful. It's transformative. And the transformation doesn't stop at perception, it extends into momentum. Because once clarity is established, movement accelerates. Doors that once required explanation now open with assumption. Meetings that once tested boundaries now explore possibilities. This is the unseen advantage of narrative control, and it's unfolding quietly in real time. Those close to the industry note that Timothée Chalamet is now being discussed with a different kind of seriousness. Not the curiosity reserved for rising stars, but the confidence granted to long-term figures. That distinction is subtle, but it changes everything. It alters how opportunities are presented, how risks are calculated, how futures are mapped. What makes this especially compelling is that nothing about his public presence has become louder. There's no sudden overexposure. No attempt to capitalize on attention through excess visibility. Instead, there's restraint layered on top of clarity, a combination that's extremely rare in modern celebrity culture. And rarity drives value. Audiences feel that shift instinctively. Engagement hasn't spiked erratically, it's deepened. Discussions are longer. Commentary is more thoughtful. Viewers aren't just reacting, they're investing. That level of engagement doesn't come from shock. It comes from trust. This is where the long game reveals itself. Timothée Chalamet is no longer navigating fame as something to manage. He's integrating it as a tool. A tool that supports the work rather than distracting from it. That integration is what separates enduring careers from fleeting relevance. The silence that surrounds him now feels earned. It's no longer interpreted as avoidance, but as focus. And focus, in Hollywood, is contagious. It influences how collaborators approach projects, how media frames stories, how audiences calibrate expectations. At this stage, the narrative has stabilized enough to support growth without disruption. That's the real achievement here. Growth without chaos. Visibility without erosion. Clarity without confinement. And as this chapter continues, the industry isn't waiting for another statement. It doesn't need one. The signal has already been received. What comes next will speak louder than words ever could. Because when silence follows intention, it doesn't create mystery. It creates momentum. And momentum is where legacies begin. And momentum, once it takes hold, rarely announces itself. It moves quietly at first, almost invisibly, reshaping trajectories before anyone fully realizes what's changed. That is exactly the phase Timothée Chalamet has entered now. Not a surge. Not a spike. But a steady, irreversible forward motion that Hollywood understands better than anyone watching from the outside. What's unfolding is a recalibration of expectations. For years, Timothee existed in a space where curiosity dominated conversation. Who is he really? What does he think? Why won't he say more? Those questions once fueled fascination. But fascination, left unchecked, eventually demands answers. By choosing this moment to speak, and then stepping back again, he closed that loop. Curiosity didn't disappear, it matured. Industry insiders describe this as the point where a public figure stops being interpreted and starts being trusted. Trust changes everything. It reduces noise around projects. It stabilizes campaigns. It allows creative risks without narrative fallout. In practical terms, it means his name can now anchor discussions rather than complicate them. There's also a psychological shift happening among audiences. Viewers are no longer scanning his appearances for hidden meaning. They're listening, observing, letting moments exist without forcing conclusions. That subtle behavioral change signals respect. And respect is what sustains attention long after novelty fades. This is why the aftermath of his statement feels almost more powerful than the statement itself. The restraint that followed confirmed intention. No backtracking. No elaboration. No attempt to control interpretation beyond what was already said. That confidence resonates, especially in a media environment where overcorrection is common. Zoom out, and the timing becomes even more precise. Hollywood is in a phase where reputations are fragile, cycles are short, and audiences are quick to disengage. Against that backdrop, steadiness stands out. Timothee's approach offers a counter-model, one where growth isn't reactive, but accumulative. As weeks pass, this moment will continue to reframe past narratives. Earlier interviews will be reread with new context. Previous silences will be understood differently. What once felt evasive will feel intentional in retrospect. That retroactive clarity is one of the most powerful tools in shaping legacy. And legacy is the quiet undercurrent here. Not in an exaggerated sense, but in a practical one. The kind built through consistency. Through decisions that don't demand applause but earn confidence. This is how careers stretch beyond cycles and trends. What's notable is that nothing about this transition feels forced. There's no abrupt reinvention. No tonal whiplash. Just alignment. Alignment between public presence and professional stature. Between perception and direction. When alignment happens, friction disappears, and progress accelerates. Hollywood recognizes this moment for what it is, a settling. The point where an artist stops being discussed as potential and starts being regarded as position. Position brings leverage. Leverage brings choice. And choice defines the next era of a career. So while headlines may eventually move on, the effects of this shift will linger. In casting rooms. In contract negotiations. In the way future interviews are conducted. In the assumptions people make before a word is spoken. This is why the phrase "this changes everything" isn't hyperbole. It doesn't mean everything becomes different overnight. It means everything becomes clearer. And clarity, once established, reshapes every decision that follows. Timothée Chalamet didn't just break his silence. He redefined what his silence means. And from this point forward, that meaning will carry him into whatever comes next, quietly, steadily, and on his own terms.